Welcome back to a new episode. Today we're talking about morning stands, what makes a stand more of a morning stand versus an evening stand, how the access is different, etc., etc. We'll get into that in a minute, but first I wanted to give you an update on these cedar patches we've been working on. I've been doing quite a bit of stuff in the excavator, clearing some out, and Joe and Jesse, they've been in here with saws, and I wanted to show you how this looks when it's completed and how the deer have taken to it. We chose to enhance this spot right here because we've got a morning stand just on the other side of this, so we want to enhance the movement through this area. We'll get the bucks in here during the rut and with some bedding taking place, and hopefully we'll get a nice little go between. We've got a logging road or an access road just right over here, so hopefully the deer will use that and go past that stand to get back and forth to this and the cover on the other side. So now, if you guys remember when we did this, what was it, 3 weeks ago, we talked about these cedar patches. You couldn't walk through any of this. All the limbs were intertwined, and you can see now we can just walk right through this, and we'll show you some of the trails in here that they've already started using. So the idea was on this stuff, if you had a flat spot, any place we limb these and drop the limbs, we were going to move it off that flat spot because they're likely to bed on a flat spot. Otherwise, we were moving the limbs on the downhill side of the tree, throwing them to the uphill side because, you know, the thinking was they would get in kind of close to the tree underneath the cedar looking down the hill. You can see this one right here, there's a big pile of limbs. The guys stacked all these by hand, so you're talking about a whole lot of work, and this is only a, I don't know, maybe 2 acre patch right here. Again, you're not going to have any browse that's going to come up in this because these cedars are pretty thick, so you're not going to add the food element like you would on a typical TSI where you're really opening the canopy up. But you know, it fits the bill for, definitely for, like, this property's got a lot of cedars, and if you want to keep the cover, it's definitely a good thing to do in some areas. You wouldn't want to do the whole farm, or at least I wouldn't want to do the whole farm like this, you know, because of the food aspect. But different areas I sure like, and I bet they will use this. I wouldn't be surprised if I found a couple sheds in here next year, but they were definitely going to use it a lot better. It's starting to get mixed in with some oak down in here that we could thin that as well next year, but there's always just so much to get to. You got to kind of pick your battles and try and get done, you know, a certain amount in 1 year and then come back to it the next year. So that's the same thing with these morning stands. We've been 6 years here now, and we're still, you know, we noticed last year we just didn't have enough morning sits. You know, you get a buck in a certain area and you have 1 or 2 morning stands in that whole area, so we just needed more options. But let's take a look at a little bit more. This is a good trail they started using right here. Check this out. Just open that up and this trail's already beat down right here. Ooh, this looks nice back in here. Got a little south slope. They can get some sunlight in here. I'll bet they'll use this heavy to bed. And we've got a food source to the west, maybe 200 yards, 150, 200 yards. So that's going to enhance that food plot a little bit, just having more bedding right here. One other thing I wanted to make mention of is the perimeter of this we left pretty thick, so I don't want the deer to necessarily be able to see out if we're coming and going, or even if it's, you know, somebody else that may be hunting on the neighbors. I want that to be blocked so you can't see up in here. So we left about 30 feet on the perimeter of the whole thing thick like it was, and then we just cut some entry trails going into it and then opened it up inside. So that's the way I did it. I'm sure there's a bunch of different ways to do it, but we'll see how this works, and you know, if it's something we don't like, we can always make adjustments on the next one. But looks darn good from here. Beautiful. This is the kind of stuff I love right here, all the strategizing. All right, now I'll take you over to where this tree stand is and we'll talk about some of these morning spots. All right, we're back here on one of the morning stand sites here right over my shoulder. So let's talk about what makes these a morning stand site and where they're generally going to be located. So the first thing we need to know is what the deer are doing, I guess, in the evening throughout the day. So wherever their daylight bedding is, in the evening they're going to move out to food. But even if they didn't move the food, they're still going to transition to a more open area to bed at night. So I remember, this was probably 5 years ago, one of the Midwest Whitetail guys was filming, and this big buck jumped out of a cedar thicket right at dark, and he come walking out. He had a leg that was real messed up, and he just came walking out into a grassy spot there in the hill and just laid down. And I remember he said, why is he even doing that? I mean, we didn't go out there to feed. Well, you never hear people talk about this, but deer have a nighttime bedding area as well as a daytime bedding area. So that's why you find sheds on grassy terraces, maybe a waterway up in a crop field. You know, any place they can get at night where they can see better, they'll usually lay out in the more wide open. Even in big wood settings like Michigan, Wisconsin, they may go from where I hunted in southwest Michigan. A lot of deer, the older bucks would, what older bucks there was, would hole up in like cattail swamps. And then they would filter out of those cattail swamps, and it was nothing but wooded area for the most part, and they would go in the more wide open hardwoods at night, and that's where they would be. So the importance of that is knowing where they are in the morning so we can formulate our access to avoid those areas. So that's, with my morning stands, I always want to take into account where do you suspect the deer are at night or in the morning when you're going out, so you can avoid that spot. So all of my food sources, my open fields, my CRP fields, you know, places like that, I'm going to avoid. So I want my access to be from the opposite direction. So this farm in particular is a little bit harder to find those because there's so much open ground. There's a lot of cover here too, but to access it, you got to go through a lot of open ground. So this one in particular sets up really nice because I can go to my east fence where I have a nice road, access road, and I come down that east fence, access it on it'll be on a west wind, so it's taking my scent away from where I'm going to be hunting and away from where I expect the deer to be. And then when I get to, there's an access road right over my shoulder right here. We made this road, not really a road, but just a trail that we can access this stand from. So when I get to that off the east fence, we just turn and walk right up that to the tree. It'd be very unlikely or rare that we would have any deer in this area when we access this in the morning. They're going to be out in the fields, like I said. So that'd be the first thing to these morning stands, is how you access them. You know, they're generally going to be back in cover, or at least in a transition area where they're going to go from these nighttime areas or morning feeding areas, and then they're going to filter back into their daytime bedding area. So that's exactly what this one is. And I've got a second trail. This is just an access road that I've made so you can access the farm with different equipment, a quad or whatever. If you get a deer down in here, you can get back in here. But the other thing with these, if you're going to make these access roads, you might as well make them go right past your tree stand, enhance the tree stand, and then I want them to all connect. So not only does it go past this tree stand, but then it goes up and it exits up in a little clover plot where I filmed that Bearcat buck, or Joe filmed the Bearcat buck this fall. I don't know if you guys remember that, but I'm sure we can cut to that, and where he walked out right there 15 yards. And that's actually what this stand is here for. We're trying to target that buck this year, the Bearcat buck. So that's what this stand is for, and that'll be another good one up there. But that's just another point, is, you know, try and make all this stuff work together. So if they're going to travel this access road, not only does it go past this stand, but it goes past the next stand, and then, you know, maybe the one after that. And I do the same thing with my food plots also. I try to put those in a linear fashion where when they walk these food plots, you know, the next food plot maybe is the other side of the creek, and then you create a little pinch point there where they go from food plot to food plot. So just the strategizing that I love. It's the kind of stuff that I really like doing, and when you're successful, when you do this kind of work and it all works out, it's just more rewarding in my opinion. But just a cool setup, and I've got a couple more that I can show you as well. But well, let's throw it over to Jared as he shows us one of his morning setups.
All right, good stuff there from Owen. I always enjoy seeing different people's setups and more importantly, the reason behind certain setups. So we thought we'd continue that theme of kind of morning only stands. Gavin and I came out here to look at one of mine that I have on a permission property. And this stand has always been a really cool one to hunt. It's way deep in here, right in the midst of a bunch of good bedding. And for that reason, it makes it always an exciting hunt. You know, you come in here expecting to see a lot of deer and basically expecting to see deer throughout the whole morning because they're just in here milling around the entire time. But anytime you have a stand that's deep in the bedding, you have to think about the access. And for this stand, of course, it's not perfect. You're never gonna have perfect. It's a little bit of a risk-reward scenario for me. But we do have a nice setup of a lane that comes all the way in here. In fact, it goes right by the stand, about 15 yards. And it kind of wraps around the perimeter of the property until it gets into here, and then it kind of shoots through. But that allows us to stay on the outside. It allows us to leave minimal ground scent, you know, wearing rubber boots, and because there's no brush or anything, you're not stepping on stuff, and you're also not brushing up against things because it's pretty much clear on the ground. So that's the reason I'm able to get back to this stand. The other key to that is also being a morning only stand. We're always coming in with the cover of darkness, and in my experience, you can get away with so much more in the dark. I can't tell you how many times we've just walked right by deer that in the daytime you wouldn't have a chance. But being this stand so deep in here, I don't even think about hunting in the afternoons. Of course, you have to think on the flip side, you got to think about getting out, because morning hunt, you're getting out in the daylight, and we do bump some deer going out. But that lane, being able to go really quiet, being able to watch when it's daylight and kind of pick and choose when we're moving, helps with all that type of stuff. So the other thing that helps this stand, that adds to the effectiveness of it, is it's set up on a little inside corner here. There's basically 2 blocks to this section of the property, and so the deer, to go from one block to the other, they cut this corner, and that adds a lot of extra good movement in addition to being deep into the bedding. The only thing I've noticed, and I may change with this stand, is over the years, this stand has been here for, I don't know, 7-8 years probably. I hung it that long ago. You can see the old stand that's grown into the tree, and we've hung a Novix up above it. But it seems like recently the deer have kind of created a trail right here on the downwind side. And just this past season, a lot of times we had deer that were right below us on that side of the tree when typically they've been out front. And so there's another pine over here that I could move it to get on the downwind side of the trail, or I could potentially just take some of these downfalls and stack them up to keep the deer on the upwind side. Either one, off to the side on that. But that inside corner movement has been very consistent in this spot over the years. Like I said, it's been such a fun stand to hunt because the action's always good. I remember a really cool hunt, specifically back in 2014. It was late November, had snow on the ground, and had a really cool encounter with there's a big framed mature 8 deer we called Patches, and he was out working in front checking these bedding areas for does in late November. Just really cool encounter with the snow and everything. I had a couple encounters with that buck that year, so that was one of the more memorable ones. And then even just this past season, Gavin and I had a fun hunt right here. I saw multiple bucks. In fact, again, it was one of those times when you get up in the tree and you can hear deer walking around like basically right away, and that's almost always the case in this spot. Behind us, there's a buck working a rub, and ended up calling to him, and he walked all bristled up, big mature deer, walked right in front of us. Just a cool close range encounter with a mature buck. So like I said, it's been a fun stand to hunt over the years, produced some cool encounters. I really probably only hunt it maybe once or twice a year because it's a high risk stand, but and I don't always have bucks I'm targeting on this property, but I know every time I come in here, it's a high anticipation, high excitement hunt, and that makes it a lot of fun. Like I said, I need to decide how I want to tweak this stand setup, if I need to move it or not. But it's always a fun one that I look forward to hunting each season. So I hope you guys enjoyed taking a quick look at some of our morning setups. Like I mentioned, I always personally enjoy seeing that. Of course, every property is unique. Every setup's a little bit different. but hopefully you can find little things you can take away, or maybe it'll spur some ideas for your own hunting situation, your own property. We'll probably continue a few of these as we move throughout the off season, maybe look at some unique and interesting setups that some of our guys have, or changes. Like I said, I need to decide how I want to change this one or improve this one. Like always, we appreciate you guys joining. Have a good week, and we'll see you next Monday.